In the rolling hills of Virginia, 1898, where society valued physical perfection and eloquent speech above all else, 30-year-old Caleb Matthews carried the weight of an old war wound that had left him with a permanent limp and the bitter knowledge that he would never again be the man he once was. A former cavalry officer whose promising military career had ended in a Confederate prison camp, Caleb had retreated to his family's abandoned farm, convinced that his damaged body made him unfit for the company of decent people. 2 counties over, in the quiet town of Millbrook, 25-year-old Eleanor Grace lived in a world of perfect silence, born without the ability to speak, and raised by a family who saw her condition as a shameful burden to be hidden from public view. Educated by a sympathetic teacher who recognized her brilliant mind, Eleanor possessed a soul full of music and poetry that could never find voiced dreams and thoughts that remained locked inside her because the world demanded words she could never give. When a chance encounter at the town's harvest festival brought these 2 wounded souls together, neither expected to find understanding in another person's eyes. But sometimes the most profound connections happen not through words spoken aloud, but through the silent language of hearts that recognize their perfect match in someone else's beautiful brokenness. What happened next would prove that love needs no voice to sing its song, that grace requires no perfect steps to create perfect beauty, and that sometimes the most magnificent dances happen when 2 people who believe they can never be whole discover they can create something breathtaking together. If you believe that true connection transcends physical limitations and that the heart has its own perfect language, hit that like button, share your thoughts about communication that goes beyond words, and subscribe for more stories that prove love sees beauty where the world sees only flaws. The Autumn Harvest Festival in Millbrook buzzed with celebration, but Caleb Matthews sat alone on a bench, watching with the detached observation of someone who no longer felt he belonged. His left leg, damaged in Andersonville prison, throbbed with familiar ache, a constant reminder of the man he used to be before war marked him as broken. 3 years had passed since his return. 3 years since he'd learned that sympathy was poor substitute for the easy friendship he'd enjoyed before his injury. The people of Millbrook treated him with respectful pity, but pity wasn't companionship. That's when he saw her, a young woman sitting beneath an oak tree, as separate from the celebration as he felt. She wore a simple blue dress, but it was her face that captured his attention. Intelligent eyes watched the festival with intense observation, as if she experienced the world primarily through sight. When children ran past laughing, the woman's face lit up with delight, but Caleb noticed something significant. She didn't turn toward their voices. She followed their movement with her eyes, as if sound meant nothing to her world. When one child tripped and began crying, the woman immediately went to help, kneeling gracefully to examine a scraped knee. Her lips moved in soundless words of comfort, and Caleb watched amazed as the child began using hand gestures to communicate with her. They were having a conversation entirely without words. "That's Eleanor Grace," said Dr. Harrison, settling beside him. "Born without the ability to speak, lives with her aunt, who considers her condition an embarrassment. But that young woman has more intelligence than most people who can speak perfectly." Eleanor looked in their direction, and for a moment her eyes met Caleb's. He saw intelligence there, but also resigned sadness he recognized from his own mirror. She carried herself with the dignity of someone who'd learned to navigate a world that saw her as deficient. A commotion broke out when a drunk man approached Eleanor with aggressive friendliness. "Hey there, pretty miss. Why don't you come dance? I bet I could get you to make some noise." Caleb felt anger flare at the crude mockery. Eleanor's face went pale, but she maintained dignity, shaking her head and attempting to move away. "Come on now," the man persisted, reaching for her arm. "Don't be stuck up." Without conscious thought, Caleb found himself rising. his cane gripped firmly as he made his way across the festival grounds. Pain shot through his leg with each step, but protectiveness drove him forward. "The lady clearly isn't interested," Caleb said firmly. "I suggest you find other entertainment." The drunk man sneered at Caleb's obvious limp. A cripple trying to play hero. "A gentleman defending a lady," Caleb corrected calmly, positioning himself protectively. "Walk away now." "Or what? You going to chase me with that walking stick?" Caleb's response was swift and decisive. Years of military training hadn't disappeared with his injury, and the drunk man found himself flat on his back before he understood what happened. "The lady said no," Caleb said quietly. "That should have been sufficient." The man scrambled away, unwilling to challenge someone who just proved that a limp didn't mean helplessness. Caleb turned to Eleanor, suddenly self-conscious. "I apologize if I overstepped." Eleanor's response stopped his words. She stepped closer, her dark eyes bright with gratitude, then slowly placed her right hand over her heart and extended it toward him. "Thank you." But she wasn't finished. Eleanor pointed to Caleb, then to herself, then made a graceful gesture encompassing both of them. Her meaning was clear. You understand me, and I understand you. For the first time in 3 years, Caleb felt genuinely seen, not pitied, not dismissed, but truly recognized for who he was beneath his injury. "Would you like to walk with me?" Caleb asked. "Away from all this noise?" Eleanor's smile was radiant as she nodded, and when she slipped her arm through his offered elbow, Caleb felt something frozen in his chest begin to thaw. As they walked slowly away, matching their pace to his limp, Caleb realized he wasn't thinking about what he couldn't do. Instead, he wondered what might be possible when two imperfect people found perfect understanding in each other as silent company. Eleanor began visiting Caleb's farm in early mornings, arriving with small gifts and staying to sit together on his porch, communicating in ways that transcended words. Caleb discovered that Eleanor's silence wasn't absence, but a different kind of presence. She noticed things others missed, the way light fell across his fields, the changes in his expression when his leg pained him, the pride he took in maintaining his farm despite limitations. Eleanor had developed her own system of gestures, some formal sign language, others entirely her creation. When amused, her eyes crinkled and she covered her mouth as if holding in laughter. When moved, she pressed her hand to her heart and extended it outward, sharing emotion she couldn't voice. "I used to think silence was the absence of something important," Caleb said one morning watching sunrise. "But sitting here with you, I understand there's a fullness in quiet I never noticed." Eleanor reached into her bag and produced a leather journal, turning to a page covered in neat handwriting. "You speak with your whole being," she had written. "Your voice is gentle, but your eyes say even more. When you talk about your injury, your jaw tightens, but when you talk about hopes for the farm, your shoulders relax. I may not hear your words, but I understand your heart." Caleb stared at the page, amazed by her insight. "You see me more clearly than people who've known me all my life." Eleanor turned to a fresh page. "That's because I'm not distracted by my own voice or waiting for my turn to speak. I can give all my attention to understanding you." "Would you teach me your hand language?" Caleb asked suddenly. "I want to talk with you in your own words." Eleanor's face lit up with joy. She began showing him basic signs. Hello, thank you, beautiful, happy. Caleb's attempts were clumsy at first, but Eleanor was patient, gently correcting his positions and encouraging his efforts. As they practiced, Eleanor wrote about her past. "My aunt hired a tutor when I was young, thinking it might make me more presentable. But she gave up when she realized learning to sign meant accepting I would never speak." "Your aunt is a fool," Caleb said firmly. "There's nothing about you that needs fixing." Eleanor looked surprised, as if being accepted exactly as she was had never occurred to her. She wrote, "You don't find my silence disturbing." Most people feel uncomfortable when they can't have a normal conversation. Eleanor, Caleb said, taking her hand gently, I find your silence peaceful. I find your attention precious, and I find you perfect exactly as you are. Tears gathered in Eleanor's eyes as she wrote, No one has ever said that to me before. Then no one has been paying attention, Caleb replied, because it's the most obvious truth I've ever spoken. When Eleanor accidentally touched his injured leg while demonstrating a sign, instead of usual embarrassment, Caleb felt only her gentle concern and his own surprised comfort. Does it hurt very much? Eleanor wrote, her eyes soft with sympathy. Sometimes. But it's not just the physical pain that's difficult, it's the feeling that I'm not complete anymore. Eleanor considered this, then wrote, I understand that feeling, but maybe completeness isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's about finding someone who makes your imperfections feel like they don't matter. Is that what you found? Caleb asked quietly. Eleanor's smile was radiant as she wrote, I found someone who makes my silence feel like music. Caleb realized that his healing had begun not when his wounds closed, but when Eleanor looked at him and saw not a broken soldier, but a man worthy of understanding and affection. October brought crisis when Dr. Harrison appeared at Caleb's farm with devastating news. Eleanor's aunt has arranged a marriage for her to Thomas Whitmore, the banker's son from Richmond. The wedding is planned for next month. Caleb felt the world tilt. Eleanor would never agree to such a thing. Eleanor's wants have never been a consideration in her aunt's decisions, Dr. Harrison said grimly. Miss Hartwell sees this as an opportunity to be rid of what she considers a burden. Whitmore's family thinks having a silent wife might be preferable. The casual cruelty made Caleb's hands clench. Where is Eleanor? Confined to her room, supposedly to prepare for her nuptials. The injustice burned in Caleb's chest. Eleanor, whose intelligence surpassed most people he'd known, dismissed as incompetent simply because she couldn't speak aloud. There might be a way, Dr. Harrison said. If Eleanor could demonstrate her competence publicly, if she could prove she's capable of making her own decisions, we might challenge her aunt's guardianship. That evening, Caleb made his way through darkness to the oak tree outside Eleanor's window, tossing 3 small stones against the glass, their arranged signal. Eleanor appeared within minutes, her face pale but determined. Using hand language, Caleb explained the plan. Tomorrow's town meeting was their chance. If Eleanor could present herself there, communicate her wishes to the townspeople, she might demonstrate her competence. Eleanor's hands trembled as she signed, I'm frightened. What if they don't understand? You won't fail, Caleb signed back. Your voice may be silent, but your words are powerful. The people need to see what I see in you. But how can I make them understand without speaking? Caleb smiled. The same way you made me understand, with your whole being, not just your voice. The next morning, Eleanor entered the town hall with dignity that commanded attention. Miss Hartwell sputtered with fury, while Thomas Whitmore protested this improper behavior. Eleanor moved to the center of the hall and did something that stunned everyone. She began to dance. Not elaborate steps, but simple, expressive movement that told her story without words. Her arms painted pictures of her life, dreams, and hopes. When Eleanor extended her hand to Caleb, he understood immediately. Standing carefully, he joined her in the center, and together they moved in a pattern that accommodated his limp while showcasing her grace, their steps finding rhythm that turned limitation into beauty. Dr. Harrison served as her voice, translating Eleanor's sign language as they danced. She says her mind is clear, her heart is full, and her decisions are her own to make. She asks for the right that belongs to every human being, the right to choose her own path. The hall was silent except for their careful footsteps. People who had dismissed Eleanor as mentally deficient were seeing clear evidence of her intelligence and humanity. "She says love doesn't require words to be real," Dr. Harrison continued. "She asks you to see her not as broken, but as a woman capable of making her own choices." When they came to rest, still holding hands, silence stretched. Then one person began to clap. Within moments, the entire hall erupted in applause that Eleanor felt through the floorboards. Mayor Franklin addressed the room with emotion. "I think it's clear that Miss Eleanor Grace is perfectly capable of making her own decisions. Miss Hartwell, your guardianship petition requires reconsideration." Miss Hartwell sputtered with outrage, but Thomas Whitmore was already leaving, disgusted that his business transaction had been ruined by inconvenient humanity. "You did it!" Caleb signed to Eleanor, his hands shaking with joy. Eleanor's response was radiant. "We did it! Together!" Spring returned to Virginia with symphony of birdsong and blooming dogwood, and with it a proposal that would forever change how the town understood love. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Caleb woke before sunrise with the familiar anticipation that had replaced his old despair. Eleanor would arrive soon for their daily ritual, the quiet hour they shared before the world demanded attention. She came as she always did, appearing at the edge of his property, like morning mist taking human form, carrying her small basket of fresh bread and the warm smile that had become the center of his universe. But today was different. Today marked exactly 1 year since they had first met at the Harvest Festival, and Caleb had prepared something that would change everything. "Good morning, my love," he signed as she approached, the gestures now as natural as breathing. "Good morning," Eleanor signed back, then added with dancing fingers, "You look like a man with secrets today." Caleb laughed, marveling, as he always did, at her ability to read his emotions with perfect accuracy. "Perhaps I am. Will you dance with me?" It had become their tradition, these early morning dances in his garden, while the dew still sparkled on the grass, and the world belonged only to them. Eleanor set down her basket and moved into his arms with the fluid grace that never failed to take his breath away. As they swayed together in the growing light, Eleanor's hand spoke against his shoulder. "You're different this morning, happy but nervous. What aren't you telling me?" Instead of answering, Caleb guided their dance toward the garden's center where he had built his surprise. A small wooden dance floor among the roses, perfectly level and sanded smooth, positioned to catch the first rays of sunlight breaking over the eastern hills. Eleanor's eyes widened with wonder as she realized what she was seeing. "Caleb, it's beautiful, but what?" "Our own dance floor," he signed, his hands trembling with nervous excitement. "I built it for us. For mornings like this, when we want to dance properly, but more than that." He led her onto the platform, which was just large enough for 2 people to move comfortably together. The wood was warm under their feet, worn smooth by his careful attention during the long winter nights when he'd worked on it by lamplight. "Eleanor," Caleb said aloud, then repeated in sign language, "This past year has taught me that love doesn't need words to be profound, that partnership doesn't require perfection to be perfect. You've shown me that silence can be fuller than noise, that understanding can happen without sound, that 2 people the world considers broken can create something more beautiful than anything the whole and unmarked ever achieve." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she began to understand what he was asking, what this moment meant for their future. "I know I can't offer you a life without difficulties," Caleb continued, his signs growing more passionate as emotions overwhelmed him. "I'll always limp, and you'll always be silent. The world will always have opinions about people like us. But I can offer you mornings like this, dances like this, love like this, for as long as we both shall live." He dropped to one knee on their wooden dance floor, pulling out his grandmother's gold ring, polished until it gleamed like captured sunlight. "Eleanor Grace, will you marry me? Will you dance with me every morning until we're too old to move? Will you help me prove that the most beautiful love stories are written not in words, but in the language of hearts that have found their perfect match?" Eleanor's response was immediate and wordless. She pulled him to his feet, her hands framing his face as tears of joy streamed down her cheeks. Her kiss was her answer, passionate and sure, speaking volumes about love and commitment and shared futures that stretched endlessly before them. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor's hands moved in rapid, joyful signs. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. But Caleb, you already know my answer. We've been dancing toward this moment since the day we met." As Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger, the sun broke over the horizon, painting their small wooden platform in golden light and turning their simple dance floor into something magical. Without discussion, they began to move again, their engagement dance performed for an audience of morning birds and flowering trees that seemed to sway in rhythm with their steps. The wedding took place 2 months later in the same garden, with their wooden platform serving as altar. Dr. Harrison officiated, having become ordained specifically for the occasion, and the entire town gathered to witness the union of two people who had proved that love needs no voice to sing its song. "They have taught us all a valuable lesson," Dr. Harrison said as he pronounced them husband and wife. "That communication is not about the words we speak, but about the hearts we share. That perfection is not about the absence of flaws, but about finding someone who makes our flaws irrelevant." Eleanor wore a dress of cream-colored silk that she had sewn herself, with lace that caught the morning light like dewdrops. Caleb wore his finest suit, standing tall and proud despite his limp, his face radiant with the kind of joy that comes only when a man realizes he has found his perfect match in an imperfect world. As they exchanged rings, Eleanor's hands moved in graceful signs that Dr. Harrison translated for the assembled crowd. "I promise to speak to you in all the languages of love that need no voice. I promise to dance with you through all the seasons of our lives, to find rhythm in our imperfections, and to create music from our silence." Caleb's vows were spoken aloud, but signed simultaneously. "I promise to listen to your heart when words are not enough. I promise to be your strength when the world questions your voice, and to find grace in every step we take together, no matter how unsteady my own might be." As Caleb and Eleanor shared their first dance as a married couple, moving together on their platform, while the sun painted the world in shades of gold and hope, the assembled crowd understood they were witnessing something sacred. This wasn't just a wedding, it was proof that two people who had been told they were incomplete could create something whole and beautiful together. The celebration continued throughout the day, with music and dancing and feasts that brought the entire community together. But the most meaningful moments came when other couples, inspired by what they had witnessed, began to communicate with each other in new ways, through touch, through gesture, through the kind of attention that goes deeper than words. Years later, travelers passing through Virginia would hear the story of the limping soldier and the silent woman who danced together every morning at dawn. Some would call it a fairy tale, others would dismiss it as sentiment, but those who knew them understood the deeper truth that their love had revealed. Love doesn't need perfect bodies or eloquent voices. It doesn't require smooth steps or melodious songs. It only needs hearts brave enough to speak in the language they share, and souls willing to dance together regardless of who might be watching or what the world might say about their particular kind of beauty. Caleb and Eleanor had found that language, had learned that dance, and had proved that sometimes the most beautiful stories are told not in words, but in the quiet moments when two imperfect people discover they make something perfect together. Every dawn brought them back to their wooden platform where they would dance in the growing light. Two souls who had learned that love is not about the absence of limitations, but about the presence of someone who makes those limitations irrelevant. Their legacy lived on in the dance floor that remained in their garden long after they were gone, a testament to the truth that the most profound connections happen not through perfect communication, but through perfect understanding, the kind that needs no voice to be heard, no steps to be graceful, and no words to be eternal. This incredible story proves that true love speaks a language deeper than words and dances to music only hearts can hear. Drop a comment below about someone who understood you without words, or a time when you found beauty in what others called imperfection. Hit that like button if this reminded you that our differences do not diminish us, they make us unique and precious to the right person. Subscribe for more amazing stories that show how the most beautiful connections happen when we communicate with our whole beings, not just our voices. Share this with someone who needs to remember that love sees past every limitation to find the perfect soul beneath.